everyone, welcome to another Underrated Film Saturday, and today I thought it would be interesting to discuss a film that is within the animation category. I did briefly address yesterday this film, but I thought it would be interesting to go a little bit more in depth with it and discuss things that aren't so related to just its animation, but also its story and characters. And as you can see by the title, that movie is The Brave Little Toaster. Now, the reason why I think this film is underrated is somewhat of a similar reason why other Disney films like this are underrated, and it was, again, produced by Disney, so it's really, I guess you could call it a Disney product. But basically, these reasons I think are sort of similar and yet different at the same time. This film actually did come out from doing a little bit more research into it. This film actually came out in 1987 was the release date. Now, as you know, during the 80s, Disney was not the top dog when it comes to animation. That belonged to Don Bluth, who was producing really strong animated films. And Disney was really suffering and having a lot of challenges. And this really came in Walt Disney's death during the late 60s. So it did suffer that kind of 20-year confusion, which is very unfortunate that a studio sort of lost its way. But again, that's sort of what happens to business, especially when you are in the business world. Sometimes when you lose somebody that was so important to your company, it probably does take a lot of time and a lot of energy to find new people that are willing to sort of carry on the legacy. So I think that is one huge reason why Disney was not having a good streak when it came to that particular era. And this you can just clearly tell by the release date of this film that it gave me all the more reason to speculate that this one did not become a big household name because of the fact that it came out during a time when Disney wasn't doing all that well. Also, this film is not a typical Disney film. The main characters are not animals. They're not humans. They're inanimate objects. They're, like I said before, they are appliances. They're not the typical characters we would see out of Disney. And that might have thrown some people off, because seeing, appliances coming to life and having a personality, that's a really hard selling point to your audience because usually children either identify with people or animals. And we didn't see appliances coming into the mix until really this film. Unless you count Toy Story, which came out in 1995, but still, that involves toys, and toys, I think, resemble something that's a little bit more human for kids. I mean, heck, even the toys, even the main character toys, really resemble human characters. So this was really the first film to kind of break that mold down and say, nope, we're going to do completely appliance items. And that might have, I think, deterred a lot of people, but I think it's actually one of the reasons why this film stands out as being rather strong, because it doesn't follow the similar things that we've seen in the past that animation studios have done. So that's another reason why I think it's overlooked, but at the same time, I think makes it unique and why it, I think, ultimately stands out. Now, I did remember watching this film actually when I was younger. I did remember it getting some kind of exposure, but I think that when it came to a critical standpoint, a marketing standpoint, this film wasn't really put anywhere out there on T-shirts or on merchandise or anything. They weren't selling any Brave Little Toaster dolls or anything. So again, it kind of goes to show that this film, I think, ultimately did get put under the bus as a result. Also, it's a little bit more darker and grimmer than some animated films that have come out. And this was kind of an unusual route for Disney to do it in such a dark, kind of bizarre way. Because usually within their animation, when they do something that's a little bit wacky and bizarre, it's usually brief and it's not all that extended out. But with this film, there's a lot of really strange moments within it. So yeah, it doesn't resemble anything typical Disney. So um, it really, I think, deterred audiences because they didn't know if this deterring would really benefit Disney, and I could see why people would overlook it in that sense, and not maybe enjoy it as much as some other more traditional Disney films. Um, so, what is ultimately this film about? Like what I mentioned before in regards to the animated objects video that I did yesterday, is that this film is largely about appliances. You have the leader, Toaster, followed by Lampy the lamp, Blanky the blanket, Radio the radio, and Kirby the vacuum. Kirby is only the one that gets a really unique name, and I almost want to say, was Kirby a name for a vacuum company? I almost want to swear that Kirby was a name of a vacuum company, but correct me if I'm wrong. But again, they sort of resemble names that, some people might say, oh, the names, they're so ununique and whatnot, but I think that might just have been intentional, just so that the kids could really just understand, okay, Toaster is Toaster, which I think makes a lot of sense when your audience is primarily children. To replace them with different names, I think would get kind of confusing. So just having them stay the names for the most part, I think allows it to make it so that it's easier for children to identify who's who, as opposed to giving them completely random names, except Kirby. But I think Kirby's name suits him well. It's kind of funny, but yeah, that's really the main characters, and they, again, like I said before in the animated video that I did yesterday, they basically go on an adventure to find their master, whose name is Rob, who moved, and they and his family, as a result, left all of the appliances behind in their old home, and they want to see if they can find him somewhere. And they go on this journey together, and they go through all these kinds of different obstacles along the way, and you sort of see what ultimately ends up happening. And yeah, it's a cute film, but it's also a film that I think has still some range and depth to it. Um, there are a lot of sad moments. There are a lot of uplifting moments. It's a pretty good ride, I think, for a kids film, and actually kind of dark and kind of deep at times. So now I want to address some things that happen that are sort of within the plot that I think give this film, like I say, a little bit of depth. There's one scene in particular that I think is rather compelling, where Toaster, you can see with the toaster, it's one of those really old, like, and they really make this seem like the 80s, because it's like this really old big toaster, and it's supposed to have a reflection, so you can see your face, and the toaster ends up seeing this flower that actually ends up coming to life. So they kind of do emphasize within this world that they create that other things are alive too. It's trippy at certain points, I'd say, definitely, as well. So, I mean, it kind of goes a little bit Pink Elephant, but not in the same way. It's almost a little bit more creepy, and a little bit more bizarre. But at the same time, there is that one scene with the toaster and the flower is looking at him, and um, that when you see that scene play out, it's it's very touching, but also very, very sad. I mean, you don't even know anything about the flower, um, but just to see those like simple moments of animation and see that kind of emotion and sort of symbolism too come out of it within a children's film, I think is just really well done. I think the animators really knew what they were doing with their uh, when they decided to make this film when it comes to inserting certain adventures and at the same time bringing in these ideas and the themes. Um, and again, there's a lot of different emotions that I think the film ultimately conveys to its audience, and it's kind of all over the place. It's a little bit funky, but at the same time, it still remains true to its plot. I don't think it meanders too far. It seems like all the journeys that they kind of go on sort of have some kind of significance and purpose. Um, there seems to be uh, some good music incorporated into it as well, although music primarily not um, primarily not the focus like other Disney films. So again, that's probably something else that deterred audiences as well, which I think is sort of typical for the ones the Disney films that do get pushed under the bus. So it's a very different animated film in that respect. It is one of those animated films that goes into different directions than what is considered the norm. And I think for doing that, it does a really good job. Um, is it maybe on the same level as something like Toy Story? Probably not, but at the same time, I still feel like what it was trying to do ultimately works. And for, the concept that it had going for it, to say that, that somebody could have executed this, like anybody could have executed this well, that probably couldn't be the case. Um, because it might be so outlandish, I think, for some people when it comes to the whole, even the title, The Brave Little Toaster. Like, and you'll kind of see too how the Brave Little Toaster is brave and conveys that kind of leadership. And, you see that I think it's a she, is how she's supposed to be the center of attention. But at the same time, there's a lot of character that's given to the other ones, other appliances, and they do seem like genuine uh, people with personalities, even though they're really appliances and objects that people wouldn't think would be alive. Um, and I think that's kind of the understanding behind the film. It's supposed to teach its audience the uh, on even though some things aren't alive, um, it's not to say that you know they're they're not useful. And they clearly show throughout this film how useful they are. So it's definitely a film that works, I think, on certain levels. Yes, it is not up to standard as something as a classic animated film, but regardless of that, for what it's worth and for what the concept is, like right off the bat, and to, looking at what it could have ultimately been like, this is a really good product. It works for what I think it is. But I can understand why there might be some people out there who may not like the film, because it doesn't follow sort of traditional norms. It it is a little bit crazy. It's a little bit strange at times. It's very trippy at points. But again, I think ultimately those drifting away from those norms works more, I think, to the film's advantage rather than its disadvantage. So again, if you enjoy something like this, I would definitely recommend checking it out. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say about the film as a whole, and broadening it out than just talking about that aspect with the appliances. It stands out, I think, on a character level, on a story level, and even though we'll see similar storylines kind of conveyed into other Disney films later, I think this film definitely started the ball rolling for these kinds of concepts, because if you look at Toy Story 2, there's sort of similar ideas in there. There's sort of similar bizarre aspects to it that are sort of part of this film too. So I would definitely say John Lasseter probably sat down and watched this film. Like, Lasseter, you must have. I just don't see how he could have not watched this film and gotten some kind of inspiration from Toy Story from it. So again, it's good for what it is. I think it deserves more recognition. Is it perfect? By all means not. But for what it's worth, I think it's worth people's time. But ultimately, I think that's really all I can say about it. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you on the next video. Take care.